as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
To get Lord's Prayer as your Skiza tune, send Skiza followed by code 738-102-64 and send it to 811.
Welcome to LifeSite News in Focus for this August 28th, 2022. You know, we're up for a big week. This week is the anniversary of the pulling out of Afghanistan, leaving all those both allies and Americans there. And Jason Jones did an amazing job. We're going to get into that, of getting people out. Also this week is the consistory in Rome, the gathering of all the cardinals with the Pope to give the pallium to the new cardinals. And it's odd because it's in August, and it's also odd because there's a lot of rumors flying around. Is Pope Francis going to retire? Some suggest crazy. He might even appoint a coadjutor. But you know what? To get ready for that week, we want to look back at last week to all the very inspiring things that LifeSite put out, which I'm sure many of you haven't yet seen. This is LifeSite News in Focus. Stay tuned. So right off the bat, because we're going to go into this time with the church where, again, we're going to see scandal, we need to remember the really inspiring beauty that is part of the church. And one of our producers did this, John Paul Gucci, a very young guy, actually, who's just come to LifeSite recently. He has done an incredible job of putting together a really beautiful piece on an artist, not just any old artist, an artist who does it in the old style, a realist style that's just so beautiful. Everybody who goes into the churches where his art is featured is captivated. His name's Henry Wingate. Check this out.
Beauty is so important for our culture because it enriches our lives to a great degree. I think if we didn't have art and beautiful art, our lives would be much less full, much less rich. So imagine a church without statues or paintings. So that's something I think the Protestant church has quite wrong, not enjoying the richness of our art. It's a natural world mostly that inspires me, the created world, landscapes and faces and figures. I especially love painting people. So I do a lot of portraits, and these religious paintings I've been doing lately enable me to do that. I'm very thrilled to be part of the tradition of realistic art. And I did this drawing of him, and then tried it here in this is my compositional drawing to try to figure out the whole composition with all the figures. And once I get that set, then I'll enlarge it to a full-size drawing, which is charcoal. If somebody's head's too big or too small, it'll certainly show. So I'm trying to get the placement just right on this big canvas. The way God lets a husband and wife participate in creation of a child, I think he lets us as artists participate in his creation to some small degree, mimicking what he created.
It's been neat knowing that you're going to be in this painting and it's going to be around longer than you are. I guess it makes you want to be a better person knowing that when you're representing a saint.
I enjoy doing these religious paintings for altar pieces or work for a church. I think that it Enriches, beautifies the church. It's good for teaching. I enjoy very much seeing a child, or maybe my own children, looking at my paintings and realizing that it's a way for them to learn the Bible stories.
What those paintings help do is opens up a personal relationship with some of the saints that they represent. The paintings are beautiful and huge and lifelike. Creates a great conversation piece even around our kitchen table, which is very beautiful.
There does seem to be a lot of ugliness in our culture today, and probably the reason for that must be the drift away from a sort of God-centered sense of reality. If there's no God, then why does beauty matter? But if you believe in God and believe that He created the world, then you know, the true, the good, and the beautiful mean so much to you. So that's what I try to do with my art is try to show something that's true, good, and beautiful. So I think the world needs it, especially now. And I do think that you hear theologians say that the best way to draw people to the church is probably through beauty. The traditional art that I do really goes way back to the Renaissance. And I was thrilled to find my teacher who in the 1970s studied with a man who was born in 1893. So there's a real link back to pre-modern art. So I think modern art really changed things. I think that the main difference between modern artists and traditional artists is that the modern artist wants to get to the final goal, which is to express yourself, which I agree. I think that is what we should do. But I think the modern artists ignored the training part, the number of years you need to study, to learn the craft of painting. This traditional training is so important, and it has to be handed down from teacher to student, and that student becomes a teacher in his own right. So it's the shadows that are so important, so vital. You need both the light and the dark. And then the color in the shadows is very important. My teacher, Paul Ingbertson, would often say is the strength of a painting comes from the colors in the darks. I would like to emphasize that to young people that are interested in art, that they should pursue it. It does take a little bit of, feel like you're going out on a limb, because it might be a little bit difficult to make a living as an artist, but it can be done. You need to train really well, find the good teacher, and then be willing to spend the time. So I'm very, very pleased to have this profession and be able to do it. So I recommend young people trying to pursue that.
And speaking of artists, our own Michael Hogan just featured an incredible artist himself. This guy's name is Jeff Bruno. He's a photographer. He's a well-known photographer in Catholic circles. I think he's worked for Catholic News Service and all sorts of things. He does incredibly beautiful photography of all things Catholic. But his story of how he got where he is truly amazing. It's truly beautiful. Check out this work from Michael Hogan. He was aided by some of our interns here. Matt Wilson helped him on this project. Take a look.
All my adult life, I worked in the music industry. That was everything. It was my dream in life, to be a musician, to be a rock star. And I got to a great place within the industry. And after we had our first son, we had everything. And I was the most miserable person you'd ever want to meet. I had a very dramatic conversion back in 2004. And it all stemmed from the fact that my wife had wanted our kids to go to Catholic school. And at that point in time in my life, I didn't believe in God. I didn't think He really existed. But I was wrestling with it because I was like, you know, we're going to send our kids, we're going to spend all this money sending our kids to Catholic school, and they're going to come home and they're going to have all these questions, or they're going to, and I was really struggling with it internally, and I didn't know what to do. So somebody had told me, it says, why don't you go to confession and go to church? And I was like, huh, go to confession and go to church. So I was like, all right. And at the time, we had actually moved just out of the city. It was right after September 11th. We had bought a house. It was only a couple of blocks from a church. So I would go in the morning to the church. I realized one thing right off the bat is that the commandments are written in order. And the first commandment was love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, or something to that effect. And I was like, well, I definitely don't love God, let alone think that he exists. I went to confession. I didn't really seem to feel anything particular, but I had gone to Mass, and I would pray the same thing. It would be basically, God, you know that I don't love you. You know, I don't even really think you're there. But if you are, it's like, I'd really like to know. One day I knelt down with this same prayer, the same words came out of my mouth, and I said it, and I had this experience. I can't describe it as anything other than an encounter with Christ in a direct way, in a way that I felt his presence. I knew at that moment that God was there. I walked out of the church, I felt like I didn't know really what to do. I was a totally radical thing. I went home to my wife, and I walk in the door, my wife's like, what happened to you? And I'm like, honey, you're not going to believe this. I realized, I was like, well, if God is real. I was like, God, what do you want me to do? First thing I got to do is I got to learn about the Catholic faith. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more about him. I wanted to know about this relationship. So I went online, and this was 2004. And if you know what the internet looked like in 2004, let alone the Catholic internet, it was the worst thing in the universe. I looked at this and I was like, somebody's got to fix all this. I started building websites. I was a year or two in, and the second problem arose is that I realized there were no pictures. It was like everything was on film, or there was just very little digital photography around, so I got a camera and I started taking pictures. As the internet matured, websites are something that's a one and done, but then the social media came in around 2007, 2009, and that was something that needed a continual stream of content. I realized that evangelization through imagery is one of the, you know, it's the beauty of the church, you know, that people can see the visual part of it. And it's not only, you know, stained glass windows or statues or sculptures or anything like that. It's the activity, the life of the church. It's the people within the church. It's the love. It's the charity. It's the mercy. It's all these different aspects of it. There's so much beauty within the Catholic Church that people will never see if people don't take it out to the world and present it to them. There needs to be more people doing it. There needs to be a revolution, basically. We live in a time right now where there are these platforms that are out there. The technology is out there. It's never been easier to accomplish. I look back on my life, it's kind of funny because all the things that I do today, they all have kind of like ties back to things I did in the past. God knew this was going to happen. He knew I was going to encounter. I mean, he knew all this stuff ahead of time. But I think that I needed education from a variety of different things in different subjects. And I needed to go into these places that necessarily were not maybe the best places to be, because you couldn't learn this stuff anywhere else. On the high end of the secular world in New York, it's like the demands and the standards are epic. And unfortunately, I do not find that type of epic work standard in places of faith. If you become a social media evangelist, because I guess for lack of better terms, you have to be prepared for pushback.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou.
Think of Paul and think of all the apostles and think about all the stuff that they were subjected to. Think of what Christ was subjected to, you know, and just go, you know, you can't let other people's opinions stop you from doing this. Your spiritual life, it has to be the center of what you do. You should be a daily communicant. You should try to get the confession, well, as frequently as necessary, but at least once a month. You need to have a healthy and robust prayer life. You have to be anchored there. On the practical side of things, I would approach, a priest that you would know, and I would tell him, I would say, hey, listen, Father, it's like I'd like to evangelize, through imagery, and I'd like to, present some of what's going on within the church. Every parish needs this. Every parish has beauty and stuff within it that needs to be presented and shown. It could be within the youth ministry. It could be within service to the homebound. It could be, there's whatever the ministries are that are going on. That helps you to begin the process of learning how to do the work, because it's not just about taking a picture. A lot of it has to do with relationships. We're all called to evangelize. It's like it's not exclusive to priests or to religious or anything. It's like each one of us as Catholics is called to share our faith and spread our faith. And the opportunity to effectively communicate the faith to massive amounts of people on a global scale exists. Everybody's complaining about less people going to church, less this is what's happening in the world, but are you communicating? And the thing is, if you're not communicating, you're becoming irrelevant. So if you want to become an effective communicator on social media, you have to either inspire people, educate them, inform them, entertain them, but you have to give them something. I hope to lead by example, and I hope that other people will follow. I hope other people will decide that this is something to do. You want to be a National Geographic photographer? Do it for the Catholic Church. You can go to the mountains of Peru and see like the pilgrimages that they do up the mountains. You can go to the heart of Africa and you can see the vibrance of the African Catholic Church. It's everywhere. The immensity and the diversity and the beauty is just mind-blowing. And I've been very privileged to have been able to see a lot of it, and now that's all I want to do. That's something that's burning inside. And again, back to the other part, God wants me to do something else. Here are my cameras. I'll see you.
So you want to see something inspiring? Jim Hale, LifeSite's Jim Hale is well known to all of you, so I need not explain who he is. But he went out to see Father Max. Now, Father Max has been persecuted like crazy for being faithful. And here's something really inspiring. Here's how he's taking his being canceled. And I'm just so proud of the LifeSite News donors, because you know what? You provided Father Max with the money he needed to do a hermitage for himself. We put out this video, and the money came in for him to do it. Say a prayer for Father Max, so I know he's praying for all of you. Take a look.
I'm doing great. Doing great, thanks be to God. And it's been an adventure, so just enjoying the adventure as opposed to complaining or resisting the adventure. It makes it kind of fun, and sacrifices along the way, obviously, but it's part of the journey, part of the pilgrimage. Getting there is just these little, God writes straight with crooked lines, so some of the crooked little seeming detours as I go along the way, it's been beautiful, lots of graces. I just have been really touched by people's prayers and love and support, and obviously my vocation is one of love and prayer, so it's a beautiful vocation, and to be able to pray for all of you, basically, beautiful souls that have been helping me and assisting me along the way. And I've been living in an apartment for 5 months, so I haven't had my own chapel, and now I'm living in just a guest room, sharing a guest room with 4 cats, basically, and for the next week or so until we can get the buttoned up on this new hermitage, and I can move in and really start this new chapter of my vocation to prayer and penance and sacrifice. The call to be Franciscan, which is for me what came first, is just that call to leave everything for God. So basically to give up everything, to have everything with a capital E, which is God himself. And to be able to say with St. Francis, the Seraphic Patriarch of Assisi, my God and my all, my God and my all. And so it's very conducive, that spirituality of St. Francis, which was one of poverty, but also of great sacrifice and great joy. It's very conducive to the eremitical and contemplative life, where the soul is called basically to belong to God alone, and not to belong to the world, not to cling to anything of this world. The journey has lots of crosses in various forms. They're very rarely the crosses that you expect, and yet that, as I said, is the joy of the adventure, is when Christ wants to conform me to him in his poverty, his humility, his crucifixion. He does so in a very personal and beautiful way, but that doesn't take the splinters out of the cross. Our Lady promised, she promised at Fatima, with unconditional prophecy, that in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. And, you know, we live for that and pray for that and sacrifice for that. And we don't know when it's going to happen, you know, whether it's going to be next week or next century, but there is this promise of Mary's, the triumph of Mary's Immaculate Heart, which would be an era of the reign of Christ our King in the Eucharist and in his church, and the reign of truth and love. And so we have to do our part now. That starts one heart at a time, starts right here with my heart. I need to pray that Mary's Immaculate Heart triumphs right here, you know, right here. I need to convert. I need to do penance and to love God above all things.
So as most of you know, this past week we had our LifeSite Gala. Really fantastic, wonderful celebration of 25 years of LifeSite News. We had 700 people come and join us in Florida at the Naples Grand Resort. It was a beautiful celebration. And, you know, many people have been to galas before, and it's kind of ritzy and whatever. It was a ritzy place, but it was a total family atmosphere. And one of our special guests was, well, Jim Caviezel, you know that, and Mother Mary was there, Father Altman was there, but there was also a real hero there, someone who was not inside of LifeSite or anything, but his name is Dr. Peter McCullough. He has experienced, like LifeSite, a lot of cancel culture, but Dr. Peter McCullough was there. I was so thankful that so many people came up to him and encouraged him. Here's what he had to say.
What I'm going to do is, this man has been fighting for our medical freedom, for our religious freedom, for everything we believe in. He is a great hero. We're going to invite him on stage, then we're going to do the blessing. Dr. McCullough.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. I never thought as a doctor that I would be advocating for civil liberties at such a time as this. It's an extraordinary time, and in many ways, it's a very exciting time to be alive. And this incredible reception has reminded me of something that Robert F. Kennedy said at one of his programs, private program, a month or two ago. He said that the Kennedy family, especially his family, they were always taught that it could be no greater honor in one's life than to be alive at the time of a great controversy. No greater honor to be in the midst of despair, to be in the midst of things going on a global basis that one feels is absolutely spinning beyond their control, sometimes beyond their comprehension. But importantly, to be alive at that time and to play a role in the resolution of that crisis. And I think that is our role. That is the assignment in front of each and every one of us. Each and every one of us recognize now that our freedoms in some way are at risk. This medical freedom. I just got off TV where the discussion was, again, all the tension was around freedom. How can one product be given to every single human being in the entire country without exception down to age 6 months and have that possibly be safe or effective or reasonable or rational? How could that be? I use the analogy of peanuts. We are so concerned about a peanut allergy in a single child that we remove the peanuts from every plane flying over this country. Not a single peanut will be given in an airplane because we're concerned about a peanut allergy. Yet, there is no concern regarding the next child who could have a fatal allergy from one of these vaccines. None. None. It's like taking a mandatory teaspoon of peanut butter and shoving it down every single person's throat without exception in order to maintain one's job or to maintain school or maintain a military career. It's extraordinary. So the circle of medical freedom is obviously linked to a circle of social freedom. And the social freedoms are doing what we're doing right now, getting together, gathering in places of worship, of being able to pursue our dreams, our ability to go to school and develop ourselves, to travel, to see our family. That's linked to medical freedom. Social freedom is linked to medical freedom. And then finally, that social freedom is interlaced with our economic freedom. There are people calling out right now. They feel that their jobs are at risk, or even worse, are lost because of all of this, and now they're economically threatened. And when people are economically threatened, then we see all kinds of behaviors. That's starting to happen right now. So it starts with medical freedom. The call in this group today, at least for me as a doctor, is to recognize that medical freedom and personal autonomy is pivotal to our civil liberties in a liberal democracy. It's pivotal. Only you have the choice of what happens to your body. Only you. No one and no external force can shove a pill down your throat or a needle in your arm against your will. That is even worse than being in a prison cell, because even a prisoner in a prisoner block has autonomy over the physical activities of their body to some extent. But as soon as that needle goes in the arm against their will or a pill down their throat, it's over with. It's over with. Defend it. Defend it vigorously and join forces with the doctors that have the courage to face this issue. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, our MC at the gala was Jason Jones. Now, it's very interesting. Jason is quite the character. Many people know his conversion story. You know, he was a young man, got involved with a woman, and they got pregnant. And he was ready to have that child. He was a soldier, and he was working towards getting out to be the father of that child, to getting married, etc., etc. And his girlfriend's father forced his daughter to have an abortion, and she called him, and he was so upset. But that riveting moment in his youth turned him into a pro-life activist forever. And he maintains that today, that both that soldierly attitude and the want to save lives. He was involved in the saving of so many lives in Afghanistan when the U.S. pulled out, unbelievably so, and we're at the anniversary of that this week. Here's what Jason Jones said at the gala, and it's really stunning what so many of the donors of LifeSite News were able to do to help this effort. Have a look for yourself.
I'd like to take a moment to share with you why I said yes to emceeing this event. When I was asked several months ago, I looked at my calendar and said, that is the worst possible week for me to do anything. Because I have spent almost every waking moment since early August of last year rescuing Afghan Christians and our Afghan allies from certain death. And August 15th was the anniversary of the collapse of Afghanistan and it falling into the hands of the Taliban. So I knew that this week would be a busy week for me. A year ago today, I had COVID pneumonia, and I was sitting in my office on prednisone, which I was grateful for because I needed to stay awake for days and days at a time. And on my computer, I had hundreds of photos of Afghan Christian families and their contact information, and we were working nonstop to try to get them on planes that we knew would soon be ceasing to leave Afghanistan. We had 2 or 3 weeks. And as the U.S. left and we still had only about 170,000 folks that President Biden promised not to leave behind, left behind, including American citizens, my organization began working to bring people overland into the neighboring countries. But my organization doesn't have a big budget, and we leverage influence and relationships in government and media and other places to serve these vulnerable communities. And I did not know how I was going to fund what we were doing. And I got a call from LifeSite News, a young man. Said, we've made a life funder for you. We'd like you to look at it so we can put it up to help you raise money. And I don't even know how you knew what I was doing at this point in time, because I don't know who really knew what was going on. I remember thinking, I said, I don't have time for this right now. Very sweet, thank you. No, we did it for you. Can you just approve it? And they sent me an email of a fundraising site that they set up on their Life Funder. And I made just a few changes, and I said, oh, thank you very much. And I thought, this will probably bring in a couple $1,000s. That will be very useful. Well, in just a matter of weeks, LifeSite News, sharing our mission with their donors, who does that, raised $500,000. And with that $500,000, we were able to evacuate and rescue from certain death hundreds and hundreds of Christian families. It's embarrassing when people see the work that I'm doing and they say, oh, thank you for what you're doing, you're heroic. I am not. The heroes are our Afghan partners, and the heroes are LifeSite News and the donors of LifeSite News. I'm really grateful for the privilege to stand with you tonight. I admire you. I'm so grateful for you. And because of Life Funder's continued support, we kept 30,000 Christians and other minorities alive through the brutal winter last year that would have certainly starved.
And just before we get to the Mother Miriam Minute, which I know many of you are waiting for, I want to just show you one clip from a John Henry Weston show that I had with Leah Darrow. Now, Leah Darrow is famous because she was a model and she was very beautiful, but then she had a rather radical conversion. And a lot of people know her story because she fought for modesty and for all sorts of things. She has a great blog for women and mothers, and she's a mom herself now. But there's one part of her story that I think is rather unique, and it came out on the program, and it was around her dad. Pivotal point of her conversion is about her dad and how she called him what he did. We got that, and then a little bit more of the inside scoop of that on the show. So I throw this one out to all fathers. May we learn from this.
And so the problem here, the crux of the whole issue, is that I was living someone else's dream. I was listening to other people's opinions about me, and I was living their dreams for me. I was living by other people's standards in my life. And it all came crashing down in the middle of a fashion photo shoot in New York City, where in that moment, I experienced a moment and a grace from the Holy Spirit where God really touched my heart. And he told me in no less of words, no few of words, I made you for more. And I remember shaking my head in the middle of the photo shoot thinking, I did not just hear that. And it was a moment, and I heard again, I made you for more. I heard it 5 times. The last 2 times that I heard it, the emphasis was on the first part. It was, I made you for more. And that was a moment for me. I just couldn't, I couldn't deny. I couldn't deny the truth of that, no matter where it came from. I couldn't deny. I was like, yes. I was looking around, and I was looking at all these people who don't care about me. They don't care what happens to me. They definitely don't care about my soul. It's like all around these people in this industry that I'm in. I'm like, this cannot be what I do to serve people in this world. And so I ended up walking out of the photo shoot, and I walked all the way home, and I did the only thing a girl could do at that point, which was I called my dad. And I called my dad, and I just said, if you don't come and get me, I'm going to lose my soul. And I said that verbatim, and there was a very long pause. And when my dad spoke, he just said, okay, all right, baby, I'm coming to get you. And my dad drove over 2,000 miles to come pick me up, just like any good father would do. And that began my journey back home. That began my journey back home to the faith, of course, and to Jesus, but also to who God made Leah to be. And it has been a beautiful process. It is a process that is still unfolding and healing, but I'm here now, and I am so grateful and thankful for God's mercy and the generosity he gives me in living a life that's for him in service of others. And that's a little bit about my story.
Wow. There's lots there to unpack. Let me rewind first for the sake of parents who are sometimes very discouraged. Young parents with young kids who are praying the rosary are sometimes very discouraged, even when those kids get, maybe particularly when those kids get into their teenage years, because the fights become sitting on the couch, sometimes sleeping, sometimes mumbling, and sometimes worse. That rosary that you now remember, that family rosary, as boring as it was sometimes, as distracted, do you still think it affected you, and do you still think it's important, and is it something that you're doing with your kids now?
Yes, yes, and yes. So what it did for me in particular is it created a routine. It also connected me in conversation with my Creator. So both are incredibly powerful. You think about, I homeschool my kids, and my smaller kids who are not in school yet, I've got 6, and my oldest is 9, my youngest is 1. And so for the 3 older kids, we're in school, but the 3 younger kids, ages 4, 2, and 1, they're listening, they're overhearing stuff going on. And I'll hear my 4-year-old pick up and say things that I did not teach him, but he is a part of the routine that's going on, and he's picking up information and he's holding on to it. So it's amazing what our children do when we keep to a routine. When we have a routine each night, or whatever it is for you, of just continue to come together to pray. You're teaching your child also how to connect and speak and listen to their Creator. What a gift that you can give your child of prayer is normal. Prayer is what I do, even if I don't do it perfectly, or if I'm doing it, being pulled, dragged, and screaming, but I'm here in it. And that routine of prayer is so needed. The monks have shown us that for centuries. Just the art of the routine, of having these sacred routines in our life, is so incredibly important to teach our children how to have a structure and a routine to connect with their Creator and to speak to him and listen to him as well.
And now to our Mother Miriam Minute.
And when you meet someone who doesn't believe, Could be someone in your family, someone at work, a stranger on the street. Be confident, Romans chapter 1, that God has put the desire for himself in every single heart. There is no one who is without excuse for not knowing God. And the fact is, they're separated from God, so create religions and all kinds of things to get back to him. But there's no way to get to God, which is why God came to us. We cannot hold back anything from God and the world he came to save. There's no time. Things are going to get a lot worse very fast. There's no time. Get your children out of school, teach them the faith, live the faith, and don't pass anyone in the world without telling them that God loves them and died for them. Amen.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of LifeSite News in Focus. Join us next Sunday and every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern.